¿Qué onda, pandilla? Bienvenidos a Conversaciones de Altura, episodio 83. Soy Joel. En esta ocasión platicamos con Liam Wilson, bajista de Azusa, quienes hace unos meses sacaron su segundo material llamado Loops of Yesterdays. Y pues qué valor, ¿no? De todos estos músicos, todas estas bandas que a pesar de saber que no van a poder salir al mundo a presentar su material, aún así tuvieron el valor de sacarlo y adaptarse a la situación, ¿no? Eso yo lo respeto mucho y le da un plus a estos discos, ¿no? La verdad es que el disco de Azusa, Loops of Yesterdays, está bastante bueno. Si les gusta la música pesada, se lo recomiendo bastante. Tiene de todo: trash, hardcore, death, partes melódicas increíbles. Y bueno, Liam tocó también muchos años, desde el 2000 hasta el 2017, que se deshicieron, en The Dillinger Escape Plan, que es una de las bandas favoritas del programa. Y si no los conocen, háganse un favor y vayan a YouTube y pónganle Dillinger Escape Plan Live y van a ver de lo que estamos hablando y se van a arrepentir de no haber conocido esta banda antes. Y nada, pues Liam es un tipo bastante amable, inteligente, conoce mucho de temas que a mí en lo personal me interesan, como filosofías de civilizaciones antiguas, religiones y otras cosas, ¿no? Pues nada, síganos, ya saben, en Facebook, estamos como Conversaciones de Altura, en YouTube, suscríbanse y vean todos estos episodios y los episodios viejos, en donde más Instagram, Twitter, y esperemos que en un futuro estemos en TikTok. No, no es cierto, pero bueno, amigos, los dejo con Liam Wilson. Gracias, bye.
Hola amigos, bienvenidos a una nueva edición de Conversaciones de Altura. Estamos muy emocionados porque tenemos a un gran invitado. Y anyways, this is welcome to Conversaciones de Altura. We're very excited to have our next guest, one of my favorite musicians and bass player, a really bad motherfucker, my main man, Liam Wilson. How are you, Liam? Welcome to the show.
I never had it so good. Thank you, man. I want to thank you for having me. Thanks for your listeners for putting up with our rantings.
It will, and, they know how it goes. So, is this the first time that you talk to someone from Mexico, like interview or something like that?
I think this is the first time I've had a podcast that had a Spanish component to it.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, it should be a little different. I hope it's different.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. You know what's the deal? That when we started the project, we decided to do it in English because we might as well, right? I mean, if we have the skills to speak English, why not share these type of conversations with people in Mexico and Latin America that are able to speak the language, you know?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and the pool of people that you can interview is that much broader.
Right.
You know, I embarrassingly, as an American, I really only speak English fluently. And I'm sure in some Americans' minds that is a feature, not a bug, but that's not necessarily something that I'm proud of. At this point, I'm not sure whether my language of choice would be, Norwegian or Spanish or what, in terms of what would be most effective for my career.
Or German, right?
What's that?
Or German. You can learn how to speak German.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, of course.
Because of your bandmates.
I'm super fascinated, just to, we'll take a quick detour here. I'm super fascinated by my daughter right now because she's really into listening to like the Frozen and the Frozen 2 soundtrack or Moana in Spanish. So,
interesting.
So we're like in the car, like, de nada, and, singing all these songs and like mucho más allá, and these like Frozen 2. And I mean, because these songs are amazing. And, Brio, all these songs like Shiny, it's something I'm like slowly opening my mind to Spanish just through osmosis, because my almost 6-year-old daughter has, for whatever reason, latched on, and I'm, enforcing it as much as I can.
Wow, interesting. Have you asked her why in Spanish? Is there something to it that attracts?
That's, you know what? I'll ask her today. I think it was.
Okay, please do.
I think just foreign languages in general, and then maybe we've had, or my wife has had a slightly heavier hand in pushing Spanish, or because of her, probably because of her history with the language. She speaks it a little bit, and then yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's really hard to say, and maybe just knowing that she would have had those languages in school, in a normal academic year, an un-COVID pandemic year, she would have been starting Spanish this year. One of her friends is bilingual at home, at least one of her friends. So I think it's just the stronger influence of Spanish in America right now. It would be like my simplest, most superficial guess is just like, she's 40 years younger than me, give or take 35, 40 years younger than me. And the Latin community here has grown into a pretty significant part of the population, and Spanish is just heard more commonly in her life than it probably was in mine.
Right, interesting. So, if you need any help with words or phrases, feel free to ask me, and I'll hook you up and let you know how Mexicans in Mexico City speak, because it's different from Mexicans of other places.
We can talk about this kind of off air, but I would love for you to share any like cartoons, any age appropriate things, whether it's like characters or cartoons or things that you grew up with that we wouldn't have been exposed to, that would be great for her to learn the language and the culture, in a respectable way. Like she's really into, Mira the Explorer, which is like this Indian cartoon. I'm guessing it's Indian. It's at least written by somebody who knows the culture. Or like Krishna Balaram cartoons and stuff. She's like into this stuff. So,
wow.
Anything you can find to share, I'm way into. She's just like a little sponge. I'm not trying to, there again, I need to throttle the media, but if it's good, if I can get her latched onto something like that, instead of like, not saying it's bad, but like a Paw Patrol, you probably have no idea what I'm talking about, but these like corny, at least to me, corny ass Western cartoons,
Right. No, for sure, man. I think I know. I'm gonna share some like classic stuff that we grew up with, and it would be interesting for her to listen the music that probably people our age listen in Mexico, which is totally different to what we listen now.
Sure.
It was more traditional back then.
Right. I mean, I hope that is something else that as she gets older and gets to like pick out her own music, is like, I want to listen to, French rappers or whatever it is, just to like, I hope that she doesn't have the same boundaries of language that I have.
Right. Yeah. No, man. That's interesting. So you mentioned Philadelphia, and that's something I want to start talking to you about, because as someone from Mexico City, I have just a few idea of how Philadelphia is because of like Rocky, and then later on, like years late. I mean, sorry. I mean, I know this is
it's one of those things. It's like a oh man, I don't even know what the word is from my perspective. Just like such a funny hero for Philadelphia to have, from like it just some fans of Dillinger might know the band Necrophagist, and I remember one time hosting Muhammad in Philadelphia for a night or two. Like, he was doing some work at Relapse. We had connected, he ends up, I pick him up at the airport, and like the first thing he wants to do is go find the Rocky statue. And I just thought that was really funny. And, you know, that was like one of the first times I really realized how big Rocky is outside of the US too. And it's just like a Philadelphia tourist thing. And that said, I feel like Rocky does a really great job of encapsulating a lot of what Philadelphia still feels like, in terms of just working class, gritty, you know, kind of like a Birmingham compared to a London, you know, or I don't really know if that, you know, is narrowing anything down for you. Just like, it's more working class. It's just more violent. I think it gets a lot of overflow from New York's culture, but it twists it into its own thing. I don't know.
Right.
I mean, I find Philadelphia super fascinating, and just because of its, you know, it being just below New York and just above DC and Baltimore, relatively, like both of those places are about two hours, either north or south. We're not far from, you know, the beaches of New Jersey. You know, we're about 2 hours to the beaches. So we don't feel very landlocked. It's, you know, politically speaking, it's seemingly more conservative lately, but the bigger cities have a lot of very left and liberal tendencies. Yeah, it's an interesting place. And then we have a lot of the cultural stuff, like the Dutch Amish. Like, I'm sure if you've ever seen like the Amish in Lancaster County, that's a Pennsylvania thing that's pretty unique to Pennsylvania. So that also has like a strong, at least to me, it seems like it has a strong pull on the politics and the values of cities like Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. Yeah, I don't know. I find it, I love living here, and I find it affordable, but I also see the issues with it. It's very violent. It's not necessarily somewhere I would consider safe in all aspects. But I think it's very real at the same time. I think it's very like, there's no bullshit here, and there's not a lot of reason to come here. There's not a lot of like New York, you can kind of go and show off. There's really not a lot to like fitness signal about here. So you tend to get a more authentic community, I think.
Wow. No, it's fascinating.
I could rant about Philly forever.
No, I love it because I've never been to Philadelphia. I've been to Pittsburgh, and I've found it really interesting because you see all the like the factories, and it's very industrial in a way, but then there's woods. So there's like and I say this with all due respect, it's kind of like a good kind of creepy, if that makes any sense. Kind of like the perfect scenario for a terror story, like a movie.
Yeah, it's got a little steampunkness to it.
Right.
You know, and what you said about the woods, Philadelphia, or I'm sorry, Pennsylvania is it's beautiful. I mean, we have a lot of we have the Appalachian Mountains, we have the Poconos. A lot of people might know the Poconos. And then in Philadelphia, especially like in New York, you have Central Park, and it's like this giant park within New York. And in Philadelphia, we have the Wissahickon, which essentially is Philadelphia's inside of the nation's largest urban park system. So surrounding Philadelphia, we have these like lush parks and hiking and horse trails and just tons of nature. If you just kind of go about 10 minutes outside of the city to get there. It's beautiful. So
for sure.
I've been connecting with that a lot more. I moved closer to that in the last year and a half or so. So I've been enjoying that side of Philadelphia recently.
Wow. Yeah. Hopefully one day I will come visit, but not in the winter.
Yeah.
Because the winter it gets brutal, right?
It's cold here. It's, you know, and not as cold as I remember it as a kid, but yes, it does get cold. I don't want to go outside. but in a safe future, you're more than welcome to stay here, and we'll just kick it inside.
Okay. Hopefully they will let me in your country.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's a bad joke, but I had to say it, man.
No, it's funny. It's I mean, the funny thing is that like I mean, even just, it's not the same joke, but I can't leave the country either. I can't do anything. I can't go visit my friends in Europe. It's like, I'm still, yeah, I don't know. Feels like there's a wall up too.
Yeah, man, we live in strange times. So you mentioned that Philadelphia is, I guess, aggressive town in some sense. Do you think that because of that, your approach towards heavier music came because of that, or how did you get closer to the hardcore scene, to the metal scene?
Yeah, I mean, I think my attraction to heavy music, yeah, that's interesting. I can think of things that happened in my childhood that I don't know, that maybe gave me a sense or a feeling of like threat or something like that, or violence. Not at home, but from like outsiders. I can remember, not necessarily growing up in a bad neighborhood, but being in neighborhoods where I was like, I don't want to go to that end of the block. Like, I don't like the people who hang outside their house all the time down there, So
I feel you.
Maybe there was a little bit of that. I mean, for me, I remember heavy metal was something that I heard at a friend's house. Like, I went to sleep over a friend's house in like 3rd grade, and his older brothers were playing Merciful Fate, Don't Break the Oath. And I remember
Wow.
like, Friday the 13th or like, Nightmare on Elm Street was like popular. But when I heard King Diamond in Merciful Fate, like that was the scariest thing I'd ever heard. And like, that and like Slayer, South of Heaven. And like, I heard all that stuff when I was like 7 or 8, like really pretty young, I think. But was immediately
really young,
fascinated. Yeah. And, it was like a needle in my veins. I was in. And then the other, the hardcore stuff, I feel like came later, like in high school. And by that point, I was going into a bad neighborhood to go to a good high school. Like I went to a reputable all boys prep school, but it was deliberately put in the middle of like one of the worst neighborhoods in Philadelphia as a beacon of community service and something to help uplift that community. So when I was in high school, I couldn't graduate until I did like a certain number of community service hours in the community.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, actually, I think,
dude, it was a really powerful thing to be working in soup kitchens when I was like 15 and 16, maybe only like once or twice a week, or once or twice, it maybe only even a few times, but just to, be forced to have that experience, or not even forced, be invited to have that experience. So anyway, around that time, I started getting into hardcore and graffiti and just getting into like city things because I was taking the subway into school every day. I had about like an hour commute. So that was a lot of time to like listen to music and look at the graffiti on subways and just like see the climate and economic shift from the suburbs to the inner city from the window of public transportation, and just, to kind of digest that on a daily basis. For sure. I think it did have an effect on my interest in music. And I do, and even now, like, for example, when we're writing like John Frum music, I'm always kind of checking the steering and being like, does this have a certain, I don't know, like threatening, confrontational, mean, violent quality to it that I think is very Philadelphia or something. I don't know, and it's not like a humble brag, but like I've been mugged and like pistol whipped, and like things have happened in Philadelphia that I at the time just kind of ironed into my experience. And as I get older, I realize like how fucked up it, it actually was, and how much trauma I'm probably like carrying. Like I discovered that book, The Body Keeps the Score. Have you heard of this?
Oh, I haven't. No, but I'm gonna write it down.
Just like an interest.
Okay.
I mean, I'm just Pandora boxing myself right now. I'm sorry.
That's fine, man. That's fine. I mean, no. Don't feel free to.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know.
Talking, man. I love it.
I think that if anything, I was attracted to the music, or at least like the shows and the scene, because it just felt alive. Going to see bands like Anal Cunt in like a small punk space and being like genuinely scared, or the Bad Luck 13 Riot Extravaganza is a Philadelphia band that I'm not sure. I feel like everybody knows who they are, but like
that sounds good. Bad Luck.
The Bad Luck 13 Riot Extravaganza.
Okay, I'm writing this shit down.
Just like, I mean, these are things that just kind of speak to the almost scumdog quality of Philadelphia, at least in the late 90s,
interesting,
early 2000s. It's just like, off its rocker, not.
Let me ask you this: Is there like a Philadelphia sound, if that makes any sense? Like in like, I don't know if this question makes sense, but is there like a sound in Philadelphia in heavy music?
In heavy music, I don't know if I would be the authority currently. I know there's bands like Horrendous, and one time Vector was active here, and Starkweather, or Turmoil. I mean, I'm trying to think of bands that I think share some similar qualities. I think Full of Hell might have some members here. Now I'm just kind of like grabbing at things, but I don't know. I think maybe a band or a label like Relapse or Season of Mist, who both have offices in Philadelphia, might have a better finger on that pulse from a I don't know. I'm sure they listen to more music even locally than I do. But to take it out of like a metal realm, we had a really strong soul and R&B thing coming out of here in like, I'm assuming the 70s. There was definitely like a Philly sound. And I think that is also apparent in bands like The Roots, where it was like, this soulful, jazzy thing. It wasn't, it was hip hop, but it was like more organic. And I think that kind of speaks to that, like, I don't know if it's a great analogy, but I always used to feel like Philadelphia was like a severed limb of New York, that like, what was cool about Philadelphia was like the gangrene growing on it or something. It was just like this really warped version of things. I feel like it's in the graffiti, it's in the pop culture stuff that was coming out of places like Space 1026. It's in the music of it was a Gimbal and Huff. And that's kind of like an earlier version of it. But I feel like Philadelphia's always had like its own funk, and its own thing. I mean,
its own soul, its own personality, right? I do believe that cities and countries have their own personality, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I fully agree.
And the reason I ask is because lately I've been listening to a lot of Mexican bands in Mexico, and I have noticed in Mexico City, that there's like a specific sound, like a specific street sound, that if you're from Mexico City, you're like, oh, that band is from Mexico City. So I was just curious if that happens the same in Philadelphia, or like this type of sound because of
yeah, I mean, I think it does, and I think there's other people who might have better examples of this. I can definitely think of like, in earlier years, bands, when I was growing up, bands that maybe didn't get as big as a Dillinger or I can think of them having like a Philadelphia sound or like a tri-state South Jersey. There was definitely like a thuggishness in the earlier,
Right.
I'm going to say like, again, like late 90s, early 2000s, when hardcore had like a like Stackhouse crew. Like there were just like there was like crew violence, almost like gang things. And I've always felt like Philly and South Jersey music was like real. It always leaned into that like beat down style.
Right.
So
Right.
I don't know.
It's interesting. Do you remember the first show you went to, like either hardcore or metal show?
I feel like one show that sticks out in my head, and I'm not sure this was like the first, but one that sticks out to me was a place called the First Unitarian Church in Philadelphia, and it was
Oh yeah.
It was VOD, Damnation AD. I can't remember the other band, but I just remember going there, and I think that was just like the first time I really like was engaged in the show and there with friends, and a musician, kind of like, I think I even went there with members of a band that I had just joined locally. So there was just kind of like this different vibe going to the show, like with your bandmates. And I just remember like looking through the records, like all the record distros and the like vegan pamphlets and just like, I mean, everything. It was just like a real kind of nuke on my social lens. Or I don't know. I don't know the best way to put it, but it was just a very influential thing, and just the fashion and the dancing and the show vibe, it not being in like a big theater with seats, just that DIY-ness in those punk spaces. And then once I got the taste for that, it was like, I was off to the races, and, any underground show,
for sure, man, as you do,
in like 2 to 3 hours. Yeah. You just drive. You see everything.
Yeah, man, it's fascinating. You don't give a fuck, right? When you're that young, you can travel 2-3 hours to see bands. I mean, I traveled from Mexico City to, was it Chicago, to see you guys actually in like 2004. Actually, well, I'll show you some pictures later. But that's it, man. It's the love for music. You don't give a fuck, right? I mean, you travel to see a band you like. That's how we did it here.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's the same.
I remember a powerful thing.
No, for sure, man. For sure, it moves everything. I remember the first show I went to, like the first metal show I went to, I was like 12 or 13, maybe. I went to see Sepultura during the Chaos AD, and it was like a big theater, and they set up chairs. But man, in Mexico, we like metalheads don't give a fuck. So in less than once Max show up on stage and he strummed the first chord, everything went bananas, fires, people were throwing chairs at each other. Well, not really at each other, but just like made a mountain of chairs, people jumping from the second floor. It was craziness, man. Did that happen to you at some point wild. In any shows?
I mean, it's a little bit of a different thing, but I remember going to see White Zombie on the Las Exorcisto tour. And it was like at a bigger theater, and like it wasn't like a small show by any means, but their stage setup rivaled like Gwar. It was like this kind of atomic nuclear junkyardy, just, I don't know, hellscape. And I don't know, I just remember them coming out and just like it just being nuts. I'm not necessarily sure violent is the word, but just like bedlam.
Wow.
So I don't know. I mean, that had an effect on me, and just being, say what you want about that band, but that left a really strong impression on me at an early age.
For sure, man. I mean, at that age, I think, and I've been thinking about this a lot. When you're younger, you are, and I don't know if this is a good or a bad thing, but when you are younger, it's easy for you to get impressed, or at least in my case, right? So you would see a band and you would be like, oh my God, it's, I think it's fascinating. So when you started going to shows, were you already into these types of, how can I say this, into different types of weighing? Sorry, let me rephrase this. I'm just, my English is not that good. I haven't spoken English in a long time. But what I'm trying to say is this: when you were going to hardcore shows, I know you are fascinated by philosophies from around the world. When you attended these shows, were you already looking into stuff like, I don't know, the Hare Krishnas, into more spirituality stuff, or did that come later on?
I think it was all in there. But you know, I didn't get introduced to, you know, any kind of Hare Krishna related stuff until I went to a Warp Tour, you know, and which was like, you know, Quicksand and bands like that, headlining that year. So that was, you know, I was probably like 15 and like starting to go to shows. So that was my exposure to that, other than like seeing Airplane as a kid, and the scenes of them like making fun of the Hare Krishnas giving away a rose at the, you know, at the gates, right, or whatever, or the terminals. Anyway, yeah, I mean, I think I've always kind of been like, for lack of a better term, like a seeker, you know, or somebody who was like into theology. Like I was raised Roman Catholic. My grandparents had a really, you know, they helped raise me, and I was going to church with them multiple times a week as a young kid, and going through all the sacraments, not being like, it wasn't a strict thing. I by no means had like a strict religious upbringing. I just had a very broad and, you know, just I had it was reinforced, you know, through them. At the same time, you know, my mom's a lesbian, not necessarily something the church was super open to. So that was always this kind of back and forth ping ponging. But all of this kind of led to me just being, you know, asking a lot of questions and pushing back a lot. And yeah, just kind of just finding hypocrisy. You know, I think I enjoy finding contradiction and hypocrisy and kind of calling it out. You know, or maybe I'm just guilty of doing it to myself a lot, and I try to point it to the rest of the world every once in a while. Right. But yeah, I guess I just kind of had that, you know, always thinking there was more to it, always wanting to be a contrarian, always being devil's advocate. That's just kind of how my personality is. I don't know how far back it goes, but I feel like at least since I started, you know, simultaneous to all the stuff we're talking about is also the same time I started getting into, you know, smoking weed and dropping acid and eating mushrooms and, you know, being a degenerate teenager who probably did a lot more risky things than he should have. But, you know,
that's how you learn.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just because, you know, I say like, I didn't have meditation, you know, I didn't grow up in that culture. I found acid, and that was just like, you know, the avatar that the energies that be wanted to make themselves known to me. So I think all of this stuff is just kind of happening simultaneously, and you know, my interest in music and you know, kind of always smashing it back and forth against like straight edge, because I had the psychedelic experience that made going vegetarian and vegan like a really easy transition for me, you know, but there was always that contradiction of being like, you know, I'm an Earth Crisis fan and I'm totally down with animal rights, but I wouldn't have gotten there had I not dropped acid and eaten a bunch of mushrooms, which is against half of your lyrics. So I don't know where that puts me, but you know, but destroy the machines, man. You know? So I think it was always you know, that thing with me too, where I was like, you know, I want to be part of the club, but anybody who wants me as a club, I wouldn't want to be a member anyway. You know, which I'm sure therapists can unpack and just say like, maybe I'm just being hard on myself. I don't know where it all starts. And I'm not really sure where it all ends, but here we are. I feel like I've always been in terms of just like the seeking philosophical teasing out the details and reading as much as I can, and not really being concerned with, whether it was okay to read something. Like I think right now it's kind of like there's a, for lack of a better term, the whole cancel culture stuff where it's like it's a lot riskier to read things, because they're everybody's kind of claimed their authors and what side that those authors are on and what they're saying. And that just wasn't a thing 20 years ago. You could read everything. And I felt like I didn't realize that some of the stuff I was reading was actually contradictory, or some of the something like a band like Catharsis pushing this like crime think anarchist methodology, and then just other aspects of this stuff. It was fascinating, but it was also very political. I think a lot of the philosophical stuff we're talking about is always coming from the train tracks seem to be riding on a political or a political economic skew with like punk and hardcore.
Wow, fascinating. Yeah, there's a few questions I want to ask of what you just said, because I find it fascinating. I myself was raised Catholic, and I went to church. But going to church for you was it something that you enjoy? For me, it was like
I'm not saying I enjoyed it.
It's Sunday, you gotta go to church.
I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy the rote behavior practice. I enjoyed the philosophy. I enjoyed hearing things and getting into discussions with my grandparents, and kind of catching them. Like, for example, like I'm going to guess that a lot of Catholics have had an experience like they've stepped away from the church in their adult life. They go home to a funeral or a wedding and they don't get up for communion, and their grandmother pulls them aside 2 hours after church and gives you an earful about what happened. Why weren't you, what I'm saying? I don't know if this is a thing for you, but
no, definitely.
For me, that might come up, and I would look at my grandmother and be like, but I haven't confessed my sins in 6 years. Like, I am not worthy to go take communion. So if I'm really being, if I'm really reading the scripture and behaving like a good Catholic, I did the right thing, and you need to respect this. And, and just loving that interplay, and, and only getting in that discussion because I love and respect my grandmother so much. And she would, me too. So I enjoyed that connection. I enjoyed the fact that we could converse on that level. And I guess it's just that I don't like small talk. But I don't like church per se. I don't like that.
No. No, for sure, man. I understand you, man. And it's very cool that you had this conversation at a really young age with your grandmother, because in my case, at least Mexican grandmothers, they're like, you do as I say you do. You know what I mean? Like they don't fuck around, grandmothers in Mexico. They like, you do what I say you do. So for me, church was like the worst, and I still have conversations. My mom is still a Catholic, and she kind of gets my point. But no, for me, church, never like it. And my parents never really talked to me about being open to other cultures,
Yeah.
So
all that's. Go ahead.
No, sorry. Go ahead.
Please. No.
So I was gonna ask if it was. How did you handle doing or experimenting with these substances and having all these Catholic, not ideas, but I don't know, ideas, I guess. And let me tell you a story. The first time I smoked weed, I had a really shitty time at first because I didn't know what was going on. So I was like super high. My heart was beeping, or how do you say? Beating a lot.
Beating.
Like, beating, yeah. So I was
racing.
Thinking to myself or praying to God, like, please, God, don't let me die. I promise I won't smoke weed again, which of course I didn't comply. I mean, I smoked weed the next day.
Just say it.
I broke my promise, yeah. So did that happen to you? maybe the first time you smoke weed where you're like, oh my God, God is going to punish me, or Jesus Christ is going to punish me?
I think that for better or for worse, I wasn't too connected to the idea of like punitive God. I think I always had some sense that you know, that good or bad is a human construct, and that God is ambivalent. That really it only matters whether you're good or bad here, and that my intention is most of it. You know, so regardless of what I'm doing, as long as you know, of course, there's probably spiritual benefit for doing things for the sake of God or just serving God at all times. Then there's like kind of the middle ground where, you know, or the other extreme where it's like I'm doing it and I'm just like the most depraved, you know, I could care less about anyone else or the God seated inside of their soul. I guess for most of my life was just kind of in the middle, where I think I respected the values. I think I understood right and wrong. I think you know, through teachings of Jesus, I understood the Beatitudes, and I understood the golden rule, and I understood, you know, treat others as you would like to be treated. I think, you know, I understood the prayer of Saint Francis and the, you know, just, I don't know, I guess I had just a cumulative thing, but without a lot of faith. I guess I just had like the tools, and I was able to kind of surf on the metaphor for a long time, or, you know, and again, it wasn't anything I clung tight to, but it was in there. You know, I think, I don't know what Hindus would call it, like skandhas or schemas, like these things that you're just, you know, this framework that you're born into because your family taught it to you. So you see the world through that lens, and I'm always comparing things, but I never had like a God guilt that the drugs I was doing, because I could always kind of like look back and be like, you know, God is just appearing to me in some way. There's something I need to learn from this. And it might be a good lesson or a bad lesson, but God is everywhere. So God is in this weed, and God is good and God is bad. And this weed is both good and bad. There's this duality. Right. I don't know. I think, yeah, it's so hard to think what I was thinking at that time, but I don't ever remember feeling like there was like a hell I was going to. I never had that kind of like, I never had that brimstone upbringing with Catholicism. There was like, you know, sure, there was hell and there was purgatory, but I guess I kind of thought that as long as I had been like baptized in communion, and like, as long as I didn't like go and like, you know, commit genocide, and I'd said some prayers, the fact that I was even baptized kind of gave me the, you know, I guess the like the relief of like, you know, you might not be going to top tier, but like you'll go to heaven unless you do something really bad. Like, you know, you might not, right. You know, and if anything, I think then all of a sudden the idea of reincarnation made me a little bit more like, oh shit. Like that's a little bit more like, oh, this is a cumulative score, you know, like, oh, that's something else completely. You know, and I think that if anything kicked me, at least kicked the guilt and shame part of my being up a notch. It was more like the Buddhist Hindu reincarnation factor than like the hell and brimstone Catholic point of view.
For sure. But that came later, right? Like what you just mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, again, being
about the karma thing.
Yeah, I think I started getting into all that. I'm going to say like 15, 16. It's like,
oh, wow.
I can remember like
early on,
you know, getting into, you know, drugs. You know, I had a girlfriend, I became sexually active. I was, you know, and then all of this stuff being, you know, joining bands, getting more into music, having more independence, getting my driver's license. I think all of these things just kind of, you know, getting really into reading, and just all of this just kind of smashed at one time. And, you know, the karma Buddhist thing, like I can remember discussing meditation with my then girlfriend, you know, who I was with from like 16 to 20. So that's like, you know, the window of when I really, I guess, started letting my roots spread and getting kind of fascinated in that like fourth dimension and the like. I've had some weird experiences that I can't explain. These books and these texts and these ancient wisdom literature speaks to what I saw, you know, or speaks to what I experienced, but you know, I still don't, I still find it very ineffable. You know, this is very hard to explain. And, you know, and it reminds me of things that I've heard in the Bible, but it also has this other freshness. There's this other part of the story, this other part of the puzzle that I don't see yet. And that's what I'm looking for, you know.
I think, yeah, I hear you, man. So was there a time that you said, I don't consider myself Catholic anymore, you know? Because I remember the time when I said, fuck this, I'm not Catholic anymore. Was there a time when you thought that, or you just
I mean,
never
I can remember, there's definitely been times, you know, being fascinated by all this, I swing my pendulum the other way, and all of a sudden I'm reading The God Delusion. Who am I thinking of?
That sounds familiar. It's not.
Oh man,
Let me see if I can.
He's like the quintessential atheist. Like,
yeah, I know, English guy.
Yeah.
The God. Yeah, I know who you're. Stephen Hawking. No.
Okay. No, Stephen Hawking is the.
I'm looking for the name. Yeah.
Black hole scientist. Anyway.
Yeah.
You know,
Dawkins,
I've read
Dawkins.
that. Yes, thank you, Dawkins. You know, I've read that, and I'm like, oh, okay, these are great debate points. You know, these are really, really good analogies. These are really, really. You have a very, very good way of trying to poke holes in this, and I feel like I had to sit with some of his critique for a little while.
Right.
And then I had to relate it back to my own experience, and it didn't necessarily hold water in every sense. Some of it was true. Or, you know, some of the ways that I think people go about believing in things and the reasons they believe in things and what they believe and how they believe and the pressure that organized religions have on people. I think that, yes, all the things that he's talking about, those things are dangerous. But as I get older, have resigned myself to more of a don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know, don't throw God out with religion.
Right.
You know, there. You know, and there's a lot of things that I feel like I don't know what I don't know, and I've certainly experienced enough on ayahuasca or, you know, even sober to be like, I don't know shit about shit. And I've been humbled a couple times in a way that I'm just like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm not even sure. Maybe I should be committed or something. But I have strong beliefs based on what I think is empirical evidence.
No, for sure, man. And you know what? Like guys like Hawkins, I mean, I respect him for sure. But I think it's very pretentious to say that God doesn't exist if you haven't tried psychedelics, you know? It's like, okay, come on, don't tell me it doesn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, and just like, you know, who put him in charge to say?
Exactly.
I think that's just the simplest thing. I think that's just a lot of hubris. I understand what he's saying, and I can even get behind. I can tolerate discussions around like God is dead, you know, or like the Nietzsche thing. Like, I think that those things I don't find it blasphemous to say something like that. I think it's a really important thing to, you know, not criticize and be tolerant of those kind of harsh opinions, you know, and if we can't have a dialogue where we push back on these things and see what they reveal about ourselves. But ultimately, we're talking about faith. So there is no empirical thing really,
right?
You know, so it's just kind of a matter of like, is it a net positive for you in your life? And
exactly,
you know, where I am, just to kind of, I'll try to finish my little monologue here, but just to kind of squeeze this in.
That's fine.
squeezing it in everywhere. I think where I've been kind of stuck lately is the idea, like I think about it like an Anthony Bourdain, who seemed to have everything he wanted at an arm's length. In the material world, he kind of had it all and overcame a lot of things.
Right.
And I think on paper, I would think that his life experience should add up to somebody who is really just sucking the marrow out of life and enjoying every moment.
Wow.
But that's not the case,
Wow.
you know, and he kind of took the low road in a different sense. Whereas I look at, you know, like a George Harrison, who also had everything the material world could offer him, more money than he could ever spend, also wasn't satisfied. And instead of taking the low road, takes the, you know, my sweet Lord Hare Krishna perspective. And it seemed to land him in a better place. So I, you know, kind of, or like a Ram Dass, you know, this guy was like a Harvard professor, you know, and then just got nuked. He just got totally nuked. And, you know, somebody like that who's got as much ego as I certainly feel like I've had, you know, and just the way he talks about this stuff and just being like, that guy is smart. That guy really understands things from a philosophical level. And, you know, just the taste of Hinduism, you know, or just deity worship, just blew his mind. That says something.
Yeah, no, for wow. So
that's where I'm
just an interesting subject. So anyways, sorry, Liam. So you were telling me that you are at this point in your, I guess, how would you call it, spiritual journey? Do you think there's going to be, before you go to the next level or to the next dimension, that you're going to find the solution to what you're looking for?
I hope so. Well, I guess I would like to think that I've found it and I just need to keep widening that aperture. You know, I think right now there's like a crack in the egg. I can see some light getting through. And now I just need to commit. You know, I guess I think that me searching for something beyond, what is already inside of me now. You know, I don't think the search is external anymore. I can look externally for guidance, for gurus, for sacred literature, for artwork that, you know, helps me transcend, you know, maybe for medicines and mantras and things like that to help me, you know, deepen my spiritual practices. But I ultimately think that it's just a matter of uncovering what is already inside of me. And yeah, and just kind of surrendering to that and getting over my avoidances and my procrastinations and, you know, somehow being more vulnerable and more transparent. And yeah, I don't know. I think that that's kind of, yeah, I don't know. I would like to think that I don't think there is like a finding it, but I feel like I have a sense of something that I'm a smell that I'm chasing. Well, I'll use a metaphor that I heard, or basically there's the idea of a musk deer. And a musk deer at certain times, like, you know, when it's, you know, let's say like mating season, this musk starts emanating from its musk gland in its anus. And the musk deer smells this scent and it starts going crazy looking for the scent. And it runs through the woods until it falls down, chasing the scent that's coming out of its own ass. So that might be, you know, a very, probably the least, probably the most crass retelling of that analogy. But the idea is there that sometimes I feel like we're chasing, we're running around, we know what it is. And my looking for something else is me avoiding the work. You know, there's, oh, you know, you might call it soul. I call it the sun. The Indians call it Surya. You know, it's all the same fucking ball of light out there. It's all that same fiery thing.
Agree.
And we just can't, we're just a window pane, and we can't get caught up thinking that we're that ball of light, or that we're the square of whiteness on the floor or anything. We're merely a window pane. And I'm just trying to make sure that my window pane is as Windexed and, you know, positioned west as I can make it. That's some Alan Moore knowledge. That's something that he would say.
That's fascinating. That's a good way to put it, man. I mean, in this type of journeys, spiritual journeys, you have to do the work, whatever that means to you. And you also have to keep well, I don't know if keep searching, but open-minded and try to be conscious, right, of what you want to achieve.
The idea of if you see the Buddha in your path, slay the Buddha. Like I've always kind of danced with that one too. Like you know, I feel like religion, there's always going to be some contradiction on your path. There's something that kind of that feels incongruent. I think those are interesting things to lean into.
Right. So just to finish up the conversation, I would like to ask you, it's kind of like a deep question, but you can just answer yes or no. Do you believe in God? Or what is God for you? I always question this myself all the time.
You know, full transparency, and more so recently, I do believe in God. I don't understand it. I don't think that I have the capacity to understand it right now. I definitely don't have the software. Maybe I've got the hardware. I think I need to do a lot more spiritual practice, but I do believe in God, and I do believe in avatars, and I do believe you know, that the experiences that people have with deities, you know, and that the transformations people have through the teachings of Jesus or Krishna or Muhammad or Buddha, or I think all of that is real. And I do think that, you know, there is enough room for fourth dimensional things to be happening here. I do think that, you know, have you ever heard like the analogy of like the Flatlander, or like,
no, never.
I'm going to totally biff this, but I heard an analogy the other day by a great teacher, Kaustubha Das, talking about, you know, if you gave me the address to your like apartment building, you know, I would be able to, like, on a two-dimensional way, I'd be able to find that intersection and find the house. But then what if I got there and I realized it was like an apartment building with multiple floors? Then that's like a third dimension. And then all of a sudden I've got to find your room on, you know, now all of a sudden you're 4D. So that's like this fifth dimension of finding this.
Right.
I just realized, you know, or like when you see a shadow, you know, if you're a two-dimensional thing and all of a sudden you see a shadow, all of a sudden you start to have this concept of like, oh, there's a third dimension that I can't perceive, but I'm seeing the evidence of it. You know, I'm seeing a shadow, which means there must be something, but I can't perceive that there's another dimension here. At least using the tools that I have. I can't see certain colors because I don't have certain cones in my eye. So, you know, and in much the same way that if you told me that 200 million years ago, there were these giant lizards walking around, I would be like, that's the most batshit crazy thing you've ever said. But, you know, all you need to do is show me evidence of it. So I think that there's certain things about God that, like, there just is no evidence in the way that you're looking for, or I could show you evidence and you still wouldn't believe.
Exactly.
So
I agree.
I think there's enough history here, and I don't think it's mythology. And I think that there has always been enough technology to put doubt in people's brain. I think that technology has always been a little bit ahead of faith and belief, and yet people still believed.
And you're right. That's fascinating. I didn't see it that way.
I kind of think we're
You
getting
just open
stupid.
like boom.
I think that we have more technology right now, so we think that we're more advanced. But I think actually the only thing we're more advanced in is technology, and in every other way, we are, idiocracying ourselves into the existential abyss. I truly
agree,
think that
man.
like these cultures that we talk about as being primitive, like when you read these, the Bhagavad Gita and all this stuff, it's like, it sounds fascinating, but it's like, what do we know? People are talking about, UFOs and alien propulsion that has to do with gravitational, controlling gravitational pulses. And I mean, I'm really kind of getting into like the tinfoil hatness of it all, but like science is barely catching up to some of the things that have been in these ancient texts. They were talking about atoms and, what I think sound like nuclear weapons and flying objects and other planets and things that is like, 200 years ago that you could not confirm that, but all you need is the Hubble Space Telescope to be like, the piranhas start to sound less crazy. The Upanishads are all of a sudden kind of boring.
Right. Wow. No, it's fascinating, man. I think this is something that probably we will never know, right? Until we move to the next dimension, right? But I think
we're not. I don't think that we have the hardware to know.
Yeah, no, I agree, man. I agree. So I think this is a great way to finish this great conversation. And Liam, I just want to thank you for taking the time and talking to us, man. I really appreciate it.
I'm grateful for your association. I'm sorry if I talk too much and interrupted.
No.
Trying to be a better listener.
We all do, man. But no, you were great, man.
Acabas de escuchar Conversaciones de Altura.